Thanks to our title sponsor, Juniper Networks, for helping make Research Saturday possible. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts, tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
You know, I actually had this idea sort of come to me a few years back, actually, where I was contemplating how there are some extremely common applications that most organizations are likely to be using, and then sort of wondering to myself, how many of those have an inherent need to communicate with or access resources outside of the corporate network. And so that kind of drew my attention to browsers and what functions might exist that, may not have been given much attention in that regard.
That's David Prefer. He's a student at the SANS Technology Institute. The research we're discussing today is titled Bookmark Bruggling, Novel Data Exfiltration with Brugglemark. Well, I think it's fair to say that browsers, certainly at this point, are fairly sophisticated. I've heard some people refer to them as almost being operating systems in their own right. What sorts of functions drew your attention?
I was just kind of thinking of anything, but what came to my mind actually was bookmarks, actually just almost right out the gate. Yeah, and one of the things that came before that was search history. So, whatever you type into, say, Google or whatever in Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge and stuff like that, that all gets, saved offline by the browser. And, bookmarks I started looking at there and turns out that, does the same thing too.
Well, explain for us, for folks who may not be familiar with it, how exactly does this bookmark synchronization work?
When you sign into your account in Google Chrome or whatever browser that you're using, it synchronizes to clients for Google.com. The full URL is in the research paper. Each synchronization that occurs generates an HTTP post request to the clients for Google.com. And profiles can then, when you're signed in there, synchronize bookmarks and history and extensions, themes, whatever you want back and forth with Google.
And so, this is for the user's convenience. So if you're using multiple devices or a desktop device, a mobile device, it all syncs automatically. And in general, this is a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It does wonders for usability.
So what was the issue here that you're exploring, the potential vulnerability?
Yeah. So, the way it works is, browsers feature those built-in synchronization capabilities, and bookmarks, they offer, it's a user-controlled function, right? So as a user, I can just go in and save a bookmark for any website I want and give that bookmark whatever name I want to give it. It's completely up to me and only me as a user. And so when you've got that sort of flexibility and you combine it with a synchronization function, then you have a workable channel for data exfiltration, right? So, and browsers are this, again, it's this usability thing, right? So browsers are inherently a consumer-first technology, and that's what their goal is there, right?
Yeah. So let's walk through what you all discovered here. Let's go through it step by step. How did you go about this research?
Yeah, so I first kind of started out by testing what could I actually put in bookmarks, and it turns out pretty much anything. And I just stayed to the ASCII character set, which I didn't have any problems with. But I started testing how many characters can I store in a single bookmark, and there isn't an actual hard limit as far as what you can save as a bookmark, but there is a limit in that a bookmark that has an excessively long name or URL won't synchronize. They only persist locally. So it'll never synchronize to any of your other computers if it's too long. But if you stay within certain confines, they will, and they synchronize instantly. And when I did my testing, I looked at Chrome, Edge, Brave, and Opera, and each of them had some very different limits. And I I won't bore you with the details, but where Google will only allow roughly 9,000 or 9,300 characters per bookmark to synchronize, I was able to do 300,000 with Brave. And with Opera, I could do 3.1 million characters per bookmark, which was
Wow.
kind of unreal. Yeah.
That's a heck of a descriptive bookmark, isn't it? I mean, you might as well just put the whole book in there.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because to give you the perspective there, I used the 1932 novel Brave New World by Aldous Huxley as my test base there. And it took roughly 60 bookmarks in Chrome. And that was about 500,000 some odd characters in length when I base 64 encoded it. So, for Opera, you could fit that book in there 3 times, at least.
Juniper Connected Security helps organizations build threat-aware networks that extend security to every point of connection across the network. To learn more, visit juniper.net/security or connect with Juniper on Twitter or Facebook. That's juniper.net/security. This episode of the Cyberwire is made possible in part by CrowdSec. CrowdSec helps rebalance the asymmetrical cybersecurity industry by making their open-source multiplayer firewall available to all for free. Once threats are identified, all users are notified to ensure everyone's protection. No matter what your business size, CrowdSec offers adaptive response to credential stuffing, port scans, password brute forcing, and much more. At CrowdSec, they have each other's backs and make the internet safer together. Visit crowdsec.net to learn more. So, I'm starting to see the issue here. I mean, if I'm someone who's charged with defending my organization against things like exfiltration, I have this user-controlled element, and everyone needs to use their browsers for day-to-day business stuff. But here's a way that data can be sent out of the organization without really any monitoring. Yes?
I mean, there is and I get into it in my paper, but there are a few things that you can do from a defensive perspective. So for monitoring, to your point, you really can't go wrong with decrypted traffic inspection. And most organizations are likely to already have a forward proxy in place that can handle that. But whether or not they're looking at the browser synchronization traffic, that's another thing, right?
So let's talk about some of the terms here. Bruggling, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's just a portmanteau of browser and smuggling. And I just kind of loosely defined it as the misuse of a built-in browser feature to transmit or receive data to or from another system.
And what do you outline here in terms of potentials for automation?
Well, so and you can do this without any sort of scripting or anything like that, but I did write a PowerShell script called Brugglemark that I have out there on GitHub. And what it does is it takes a raw text file, base64 encodes the data, splits it up into smaller strings, and then writes those strings as bookmarks. And then from there, those bookmarks are instantly synchronized to any other signed-in machine, which could be outside of your corporate network. And Brugglemark can then be used to reconstruct the original raw text file on that machine.
So are we primarily thinking about like an insider threat here? Because wouldn't folks on both sides of this need to have access to the user account?
Well, I mean, it could either be an insider threat or it could be an attacker who's already gained access to the internal network. And maybe they're looking for another sort of covert way of getting the data out, or maybe they are, unable to use some of the other methods that they're, accustomed to using. They're afraid of, tripping, some of the detection mechanisms that they think that the organization might have.
Right. Have you seen any signs that this sort of technique has been used by anyone, but before your own research on it?
No, I have not. However, there was some research, and the person's name, I'm not familiar with how to say it, so I'm going to butcher it, but I think it's Bojan. And then his last name starts with a Z. I apologize. But I just can't remember off the top of my head. But he had done some research into extensions that were being used as a command and control channel with Google Chrome. And I had actually seen that research come out a little bit before I started my own. And as I mentioned, I've been thinking about this for a few years, but I hadn't done anything with it. And when I saw that, I was like, damn, someone beat me to the punch. But as I read it, I saw that they were sticking to the extensions. So I thought, okay, well, we'll go forward with bookmarks. But yeah.
What is your take on this? I mean, the fact that these browsers allow such long bookmarks, I mean, that in itself seems a bit excessive.
Yeah, it kind of seems wholly unnecessary, at least, especially from the perspective of, say Opera doing 3.1 million characters. I don't think anyone's saving bookmarks that are that long. Usually you have a bookmark that says like Twitter or Google or whatever, right? So I definitely think that, they could rein in the character limit there. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter so much because it just means I have to use more bookmarks to save that data, right?
Right. Because there isn't really a practical limit on the number of bookmarks you can have.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up as well. And so what I found in my testing is that profiles could synchronize more than 200,000 bookmarks. And I actually didn't find a ceiling. I just had to cut the testing off at some point. So suffice it to say that while some users might have 200,000 bookmarks or more, I'm guessing that the average user probably doesn't come anywhere near that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what are your recommendations then? I mean, to what degree do you think this is a serious threat, and what should organizations be mindful of?
I mean, I probably wouldn't start panicking or anything. I mean, it's just another thing that's out there, right? And it's not really a vulnerability or a weakness. It's really just abusing a feature. It's not a bug by any means. Mm-hmm. It's a feature. But from a defense point of view, one of my recommendations, and again, the research paper goes in depth there, but the first thing to do is to consider whether or not an organization actually needs synchronization enabled, because we can disable it in its entirety through group policy. But the unfortunate problem there is that it probably isn't a tenable solution for most organizations to disable that synchronization functionality, because it is useful for their users, especially, someone who's working on a laptop and then they got to go catch a flight somewhere, using their mobile phone to access company resources. So in lieu of disabling it completely, a more reasonable option is to use this restrict sign-in to pattern policy that Google provides, which allows you to specify email domains that are allowed to sign in. So we can limit the email addresses to only those with a domain owned by the organization. On that point too, it's also important to note that those group policy options, they can be bypassed by just using another browser, because I can go and download and install a different Chromium browser without admin privileges. So if you've got Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge in your environment, I can go and download Brave or Opera or Vivaldi and use that. And unless you have that restrict sign in to a pattern policy set for each of them, I can just, go and sign in with, an attacker controlled email and go on my merry way. So to solve that, we would really need to start seeing, application allow listing used a lot more often, because the only alternative is to be on the constant lookout for unauthorized browser executables.
Yeah. As you were making your way along this journey, the research that you did here, were there any things that were particularly surprising or unexpected?
The number of characters in the bookmarks and the number of bookmarks that I could synchronize were certainly, when I was testing, that I could have over 200,000 bookmarks, as I was climbing my way up there, I noticed the browser really starting to chug a bit. And so, that was kind of interesting, but nothing else really outside of that.
Our our thanks to David Prefer from the SANS Technology Institute for joining us. The research is titled Bookmark Bruggling, Novel Data Exfiltration with Brugglemark. We'll have a link in the show notes. Thanks to Juniper Networks for sponsoring our show. You can learn more at juniper.net/security or connect with them on Twitter or Facebook. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Rachel Gelfand, Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week.